All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. Bear with me just a moment here while I get the video pulled up, and we will go ahead and get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Smith. I am the Wellness Program Administrator with Employee Development and Wellness Services at Georgia State University. By trade, I am a registered dietitian, so it is my job to help people out with all things related to food and nutrition. Now, if you've seen our cooking demonstrations before, you know that we typically make more of a full meal, but since it's December, I wanted to do something a little fun, a little festive, so we're going to mix it up a bit today. Before we get started, though, we are going to be recording today's session, so know that you'll be able to view this again at a later time or share it with a colleague who might not have been able to attend today. We're also going to be monitoring the comment section, so if you've got any comments, questions, anything like that, we'd love to have you put it in that chat box there. We'll be sure to address it at the end. And then the final bit of information is we're going to be sending out a copy of today's recipe along with the nutrition label so you can see how it might fit into your daily diet. So today we're going to be making something, again, that's a little festive. It is a dark chocolate peppermint energy bite recipe. So we'll talk about a few modifications for how you can change this to better suit your taste if you're not interested in all those flavors. But the basic idea here is we are making a fun treat and snack that is a no-bake recipe. So you don't need an oven or any heat or anything like that. We're able to basically just assemble all the ingredients together and have this recipe up and running. So really easy to make, really tasty. And whenever we're trying to come up with treat ideas around the holiday season, of course, there are a lot of great flavors. So this recipe in particular involves some dark chocolate as well as some peppermint candy canes, but we are still able to make a treat have a lot of nutrition and a lot of health benefits to it. So that's what we're going to talk you through today, is how we can kind of combine all these good ingredients. So in terms of supplies, you won't need too much for this. You'll probably want a cutting board and a knife to chop up some of the things into slightly smaller pieces before we use a food processor. Now, if you don't have a food processor, we will talk through some alternatives that you can do at home in order to make this happen. If you do have a food processor or a high-powered blender, the recipe will definitely be a little bit easier for you, though. So in terms of all the ingredients we'll be using, we'll go through these real quick. We're going to be using dark chocolate. You're going to need 1.5 ounces for one recipe. So 1.5 ounces is usually half of a standard size bar. So this is a 3-ounce bar, so I'll be using exactly half of it. In terms of how dark you want it to be, I would recommend doing at least about 70% dark. You can definitely make it more dark if you enjoy the bitterness of it. As chocolate gets darker, it tends to have a higher ratio of fat compared to sugar. So milk chocolate has a little bit less fat, a little more sugar in it. Dark chocolate is more concentrated on that fat and lower in the sugar content. So we're using dark chocolate. I'm actually using 85% dark today, but again, I would do anywhere from 70% upwards, depending on what you like. So we'll need a chocolate bar. We're going to use candy canes. These are optional, so you can take these out if you'd like to, but if you don't like peppermint, but we're just going to use 2 candy canes, so we don't need a whole lot. This recipe in total is going to make 16 of these energy bites, and a serving is considered 2 of them. But we'll talk through that nutrition label here in just a bit. We're also going to use chia seeds. So now we're going to start adding some of that nutrition into this recipe. I've used chia seeds several times throughout my recipes, but if you are not familiar with them, they are just a tiny little black seed here. They are very, very healthy, definitely a superfood. So whenever we're using chia seeds, we are getting in omega-3s, which are a very, very healthy fat. They are linked to numerous health benefits, including improved cognition. So omega-3s are present in chia seeds. Chia seeds are also a great source of fiber and protein. You're going to hear me talk about both fiber and protein in several of these ingredients and how they contribute to our well-being. So fiber helps us with digestion. It helps things move smoothly through our system. It can help lower our cholesterol. If we have elevated cholesterol levels, fiber can help move it to a healthier range. Again, it helps with that bowel regularity and digestion. And it can also slow the increase of blood sugar. So if you eat something that has carbohydrates or sugar in it, your blood sugar goes up. That's a natural reaction. fiber can help slow down that process and make it kind of a steadier stream of energy, if you will. In addition, fiber helps us feel full and satisfied. So when we eat things with fiber, we tend to be happier with smaller amounts of food, so it can aid with things like weight management as well. And then the protein in that, of course, is just going to help us with tissue repair, muscle building, all of that good stuff. So we're going to use 2 tablespoons of chia seeds. To give it a little bit of a sweet and salty mix, we've got some sweetness coming from these ingredients. We're going to use half a teaspoon of salt. And then for our main sweetener, we're trying not to rely on a lot of added sugar. So the candy has sugar in it, but that's not where we want most of our sweetness to come from. We're actually going to get it from fruit. So I'm going to be using dried dates today. You are able to really swap this out for a lot of different dried fruit options if you don't want to do dates. This is an 8-ounce package. That's how much we'll be using. If you don't want to do dates, some substitutions might be things like raisins. That would work. You could do dried apricots. Any of that stuff is going to be functionally the same in terms of the recipe. We're looking for something to add some sweetness, have a little bit of stickiness to help the ingredients stay together, and those dried fruits will do the trick for that. So whenever we eat this, it is considered a serving of fruit, so that's a nice thing to mix into this. And while it does have sugar, because fruit contains sugar, it's natural sugar. So it comes with some nutritional benefits. We're getting some vitamins, we're getting some minerals, as opposed to a candy cane, which is just what we call added sugar. There's not really any nutrition to the candy cane, it's just sugar, as opposed to the fruit, which brings a lot of nice things with it. So that's why we're relying on this as our main sweetener. And then the final 2 ingredients, we're going to be using 2/3 a cup of old-fashioned oats. This is going to add some additional fiber to this, and it's going to give us some sustained energy from these rather than just like a quick burst of sugar. We want it to keep us energized for a longer period of time. And the final ingredient will be half a cup of creamy peanut butter. So the peanut butter will help the ingredients stick together for sure. It's also going to add some additional protein to this recipe. So protein combined with the carbs, combined with some of the fats from the chia seeds is going to give us a nice balanced little energy bite here that will hopefully keep you energized and happy until you make it to your next meal. So let's start getting these ingredients together. I mentioned that I'm going to be making use of a food processor. It definitely speeds up everything if you've got one of these. If you don't, though, you can chop these ingredients into small pieces just by using a regular knife, and you'll still be able to do the process. So the first thing I want to do is get our chocolate ready. So again, we only want 1.5 ounces of chocolate, so I'm going to actually divide this 3-ounce bar in half. Now, most of your chocolate bars will have squares, but you might be able to just break it in half evenly. If not, you can always use a knife to chop it. Now, what I would recommend for the chocolate, whether you're using a food processor or chopping it by hand, is go ahead and break it into smaller pieces to start off with. Even if you've got a really good food processor, a really good blender, if you put in smaller pieces, it just makes it easier for it to get chopped up. It won't get stuck on anything. So I'm just basically breaking these into the little individual squares. If you've got a weak blender or you're not very confident in your food processor, you can always take the knife through and chop it up a couple more times. And then again, if you're doing it by hand, just go ahead and chop these into small pieces. It doesn't need to be ground into dust, but just little flecks of it. Almost like you're making chocolate chips. That should do the trick for whenever you end up making it. So we'll put the chocolate in there. Next, I'll add those 2 tablespoons of chia seeds. Again, adding some fiber, some protein, some healthy fats through those omega-3s. We will put in the half a teaspoon of salt to have some sweet and salty mixed together, mixed for a good snack. And then we'll go ahead and add in the dates. Now, if you are, again, not very confident in your food processor, you might want to chop these up into smaller pieces. They're not super tough, but they do have some resistance to them. Again, you don't have to make it super small, but cutting them into small halves like this can definitely make the process a little easier. I am using a Ninja food processor. It tends to work pretty well for this type of stuff. So I am going to just go ahead and put them in as they are. I think the food processor will take care of it just fine. But again, if you're not super confident, you can always chop those up into smaller pieces. If you're substituting them for a different dried fruit like raisins, of course are already so small that you won't have to worry about that. And in fact, if you don't have a food processor and you're doing this by hand, I would recommend using an equivalent amount of raisins instead of the dates, just because they're already small enough that you don't have to do anything extra. So we've got that in there. let's add our oats. We're going to do 2/3 a cup of oats. So this is adding some healthy carbohydrates. We're getting some fiber in here for that sustained longer term energy. Okay. And then the last ingredient we're going to add before we blend this all together will just be 1/2 cup of the creamy peanut butter. Now, I am a chunky peanut butter fan in most things if I'm making sandwiches or doing other stuff, but for this recipe, I would recommend using the creamy. It tends to work better to help everything kind of stay together, to not have those pieces of nuts in there. So I'm just going to measure this out in this 1/2 cup here. So peanut butter is adding some protein. It's adding a little bit of additional fat to it. And there's actually some fiber in peanut butter as well. So we're getting a couple things from that to help make this a little more well-rounded. And I would recommend having a spatula nearby because we're adding this peanut butter in. We have that dried fruit. Things are definitely going to get a little sticky in there. So the reason I mentioned having a good quality blender or food processor is this is a lot of dry ingredients. There's not a liquid that goes into this. So we want to make sure that it's able to get through everything properly. So at this stage, if you don't have a food processor and you've chopped things up, just put it in a large mixing bowl and you'll be able to start rolling it together with your hands. But if you've got a food processor like me, we're going to go ahead and get this set up. Now, you'll need to process it for different amounts of time depending on how good your blender or food processor is. What I recommend doing is letting it blend through and then periodically stopping it, taking a spatula and pushing things down the sides. The peanut butter has a tendency to get stuck there. You can just scoop it down and push it towards the blade. So bear with me a moment. We're going to blend this for a minute. So again, I'm going to pop it off here, pull out the spatula, and just scrape some stuff down. I've got some stuff sticking to the lid too, so you can scoop that in. And what you're kind of doing with this recipe is we're almost making like a no-bake granola bar, right? We've got a lot of the similar ingredients. If you've ever had like a Quaker Chewy bar, it's got chocolate chips and oats, raisins, and things like that. We're basically putting all those ingredients in, but we're not having to bake them because of how we're forming this. So if you've had something like that before, it kind of tastes like that, but we're getting to customize the flavor. We're reducing the added sugar and focusing more on that fruit to make it a bit more nutritious. I'll set this to the side. We'll give this another go around here real quick. Okay. And if you're not sure if it's been blended enough, what I would check for is the dates and the chocolate, since those are the bigger pieces. Make sure that they've been broken down into smaller pieces, and if they are, then you should be good to go. And I can tell just visually here, I'll show you what the inside of that looks like. You can see it kind of looks like a granola bar. The chocolate pieces have been mixed up well, so that is perfect. So I'm going to take the blade out of the middle of this here. And now for the next step, if you want to use the candy canes, if you want to use the candy canes, what you'll do is we're going to crush them up into a powder. And then we're going to roll these into them to pick up some like candy cane dust on the outside. If you like peppermint, it's really, really tasty. You've got the sweet and salty coming from this with that kind of cool sweet sensation from the peppermint. It gives it a little bit of a crunch. So this is a great kind of festive item to have if you want to make little snacks or appetizers for family members, kids, anything like that. This works really well. If you're not a fan of peppermint, though, you can just leave these candy canes out. It'll lower the sugar a little bit in the total recipe. And these by themselves are still really, really tasty. It's just like a chocolatey peanut butter flavor. So for the candy canes, if you have the food processor, what you can do is throw it in the food processor and just blend it up again. You'll just make it into kind of some candy cane dust that will coat those in. If you don't have a food processor for this step, you'll want to have a Ziploc bag or something else that you can seal. Break the candy canes into little pieces by hand. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put that inside of the bag, and you can use a couple different items from here. So put those candy cane pieces inside of the bag. And if you've got a rolling pin, that will actually work really well. But what you want to make sure you do first is seal the bag up. We're going to be smashing this, and if the bag's open, the candy canes are going to fly everywhere. So if you've got a rolling pin, you can actually just roll through it like that, and it'll break it into the perfect little pieces that we'll want. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can actually just use a spoon or anything that you can apply pressure with and press down on it. If you have like a metal spoon or a wooden spoon like that, you can actually just kind of smash into it, and I'm going to do that here. It's going to make some noise. And that will make it into basically what you'd get if you had put it in a food processor. So that's a pretty easy way to do it if you don't have the equipment at home. So from here, what you'll do is just pour the little pieces of candy cane into a bowl there. And we can start forming the energy bites. So you can just use your hand for this. The measurement that's recommended is about 2 tablespoons. So if you've got a tablespoon measure and you want to portion them out perfectly, you can get 1 tablespoon and then set that to the side, and then get a second tablespoon, and you'll know that those are going to be about the right size. What I recommend doing is measuring the first one, and all you're doing is balling it up. If you've ever worked with dough or anything like that, it's the same idea. And once you get an idea of the size of the first one from measuring, I usually will just set it there and then reach in and try to make additional ones that are about the same size. So the recipe is designed to make 16 total balls, so you can try to portion that out as you want to. If you want to make them a little smaller, a little larger, you are more than welcome to. If you're making them for kids, you may want to scale it a little bit, but I find that the 2 tablespoon size is about the right amount for what I'm looking for. Now, I mentioned this is kind of a peanut butter and chocolatey flavor. It does kind of taste a little bit like a Reese's cup because of those flavors being in there together. I think it's really pleasant. But you can definitely make this your own by adding other ingredients to it. We did the chia seeds, we did the oats. If you are not a fan of peanut butter, maybe you prefer almond butter or cashew butter or another nut butter, you can definitely swap that out, just the same amount. Instead of half a cup of peanut butter, half a cup of any other form of nut butter will do just the trick. So if you like peppermint, now what you can do, these still have some stickiness to them. You can roll it inside of the candy canes here, and it'll just pick up little pieces of it, and you'll have some of those candy cane pieces to kind of enhance it and give it a nice little crunch to it and some of that cool seasonal peppermint flavor. You could really coat this with a lot of different things. If you've got other things that you'd rather put on the outside, maybe you don't want to do candy canes, but you wanted it to still be festive, you could do like some small sprinkles or something like that. Our goal, though, is to not completely surround it with the candy cane. We are trying to keep these a little bit healthier, so we're doing a light amount of candy and just spreading a little bit of that around. So I'm just going to do a couple more here. And we'll set these on a plate and try to get you a closer look at what they end up looking like. So that's them there. Hopefully you can make that out a little bit. So the serving size is 2 of them. They are really, really nice for bringing to work, honestly. I made these last year, and they're great. You can pop them in little containers. If you need a pick-me-up in the afternoon, this is something that just eating 2 of these is really good. They will last for about a week in an airtight container, and you don't need to refrigerate them or anything like that. Everything in here is stable, just in the airtight container, stored at room temperature. Now, what I do want to show everyone is the nutrition information so we can see how all these ingredients add together, because normally we are making full meals. We're really, really focused on the nutrition. So when we're making something like this, it's kind of a treat, kind of just a snack. We still want to see how all the different ingredients combine together. So give me just a second here. I'm going to pull up the nutrition label so we can look at it together. All right. So on the left side of the screen there, you can make out the label. And again, we'll be sending this out with a copy of the recipe. So the serving size is 2 pieces. And in 2 pieces, there are 260 calories. So if you're enjoying it as an afternoon snack or a treat, this is a very reasonable amount of calories. We're not breaking the bank or anything like that. It's got a little bit of fat and a little bit of saturated fat in it. So not too high of an amount, but enough that you're able to taste the peanut butter, enjoy the chocolate, still get a little bit of that indulging in, but we're not going to go overboard. In terms of total carbohydrates, there are 36 grams. but 5 grams of that is fiber. So we mentioned that fiber helps us with digestion. It can help lower cholesterol. It can help us feel full and satisfied after eating. So we've got 5 grams in a serving of this, and that's coming again from the chia seeds, the oats, the dates, and a little bit of contribution from the peanut butter as well. There are 25 grams of total sugar, which at first glance will seem like a lot, but most of that sugar is actually just coming from the dried fruit. So there's only 5 grams of added sugar. So a little bit from the chocolate and a little bit from the candy canes. If you don't want to do the candy canes, that number will actually be even lower. It'll be closer to about 3 grams of added sugar. So most of the sugars in this recipe are natural. We're getting them from fruits, and we're getting them with some vitamins and minerals to help our body be healthy. And then lastly, as a snack, this does have a little bit of protein in it. It's got about 6 grams because of the peanut butter and the chia seeds helping us out there. And the reason we like for our snacks or our treats to have a little bit of protein is protein also tends to help us feel fuller and more satisfied. If you've ever eaten something like candy as a snack and you feel that quick burst of energy and then you're crashing and you feel like you're hungry again, that's because candy is just simple sugar. When we have things that are a bit more complex and we have things like fiber, we have things like protein and some healthy fats, it helps us feel fuller, it helps us feel satisfied, and it means that we won't instantly want to snack again. So all in all, these ingredients come together to really make a pretty balanced nutrition label. We've also got a few other small ingredients contributing down there. We've got 4% of your daily calcium. Most of that comes from the chia seeds, 10% of your daily iron, and 8% of your daily potassium. So for something that's kind of a fun seasonal treat type food, I think this really works out well to be pretty nutritionally balanced. Like I mentioned, you can make these year round and just keep the peppermint out of them, and they are a nice peanut buttery chocolate snack that you can have. Really easy to make, very affordable as well. And again, for storage purposes, all you'll need to do is put it in an airtight container. You can keep it in the fridge if you want, but you don't have to, and it's good for up to about a week. So that wraps up today's cooking demonstration. As I mentioned, we are going to be sending out a copy of the recipe to everyone. So we'll be sure to share that with you. Let me pull my video back up here. So we'll be sure to share that with you. You're also going to get a link to the recording and a link to a short survey where you can let us know what you thought of today's event, if you have any ideas for other events or any feedback you might want to share with us. If you're not already on our email list, we do send out emails to let people know about this event and our other events as well. We've got all sorts of things going on throughout the month of December, from virtual workouts to yoga and meditation, all sorts of great things happening. So if you're not already on our mailing list, you can email us at edws@gsu.edu, and we'll be sure to get you on there so you can make sure to stay up to date on all of our different offerings. With that being said, let me just check the chat to see if there are any questions or comments that I need to address before we wrap up. Okay, so someone asking just to run through the substitutions I mentioned again real quick. So in terms of substitutions, for the fruit, I used dates, but you could certainly use any other form of dried fruit. Things like raisins will work really well, especially if you don't have a food processor. I used 8 ounces of this today. So you'd want to use a similar amount of whatever other dried fruit you make for everything to be balanced. The other substitutions I talked about were, instead of doing peanut butter, you could do any form of nut butter that you enjoyed, almond butter, cashew butter, that sort of thing. And then the last thing that I made was the modification of, if you're not a big fan of peppermint, you could definitely leave that out of the recipe, and you'd still be able to enjoy these. At their base, the energy balls or the energy bites are still really, really tasty with the chocolate and the peanut butter working together. So I think that's everything. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. I hope you enjoyed this. This was just meant to be kind of a little holiday treat for us to have throughout the month of December. We will be back in January doing our regular cooking demonstrations, focusing again more on meal prep for lunch and dinner and those full meals. And we hope to see you then. Have a happy holiday, everyone, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.